In wrestling, people love to say the peak only comes once, young, fast, on fire, and then time takes everything back. But sometimes, the ones everybody writes off as washed are the ones who come back the hardest. Not to beg for pity applause, but to prove they still know how to make a crowd jump out of their seats. Some reinvent themselves with a new gimmick. Some get reborn because the right opponent shows up at the right moment. Some only need one perfect beat to drag the whole world back to the glory days. Today, we're looking back at those kinds of late-game comebacks. Kung Bat Dao Nai Thoi Now, Wrestling Sphere, go! Number 11. Billy Gunn. If you told an Attitude Era fan that Billy Gunn would have another breakout run after turning 50, they'd laugh in your face. Back then, Billy was a key piece of DX and the New Age Outlaws, then had that Mr. Ass stretch, over, entertaining, memorable. But almost nobody saw him as the guy who could carry a show. Then wrestling did what wrestling always does. It took a wild left turn. After years away from the spotlight, Billy showed up in AEW not as a dusty nostalgia statue, but as a legit strong uncle who could walk out and instantly pull real reactions. At first, he was beside the Gun Club as the dad who teaches, and slaps you if you step out of line. But the real gear shift happened when Billy linked up with the Acclaimed and turned into Daddy Ass. The name sounds ridiculous, and that's exactly why it worked. Billy leaned into the joke, let people clown him, let himself be the setup, and in return, he gave the audience comedy timing that was razor sharp, plus a natural charm that a lot of younger wrestlers can't fake. And the most important part, he wasn't just standing there smiling. Billy still wrestled. He still took bumps. He still threw people around. He still blasted out power moves like he was saying, I'm not out of juice yet. It all felt effortless. No forcing it, no trying to act young, no awkward, please love me energy. That's what made this Resurgence money. It was organic. The crowd wasn't chanting his name out of sympathy for a veteran. They were loud because they genuinely wanted him on screen. And at an age where most people just want peace and quiet, Billy found a brand new lane, a bridge for the next generation, and a guy who made every segment he touched feel bigger. A comeback doesn't always need a top title. Sometimes it just needs the crowd to believe, and laugh on cue. Number 10. Fit Finlay. His name is Finlay. And just like that meme nobody says out loud but everybody thinks, this man really likes showing up in YouTube top 10 videos. Not because people ran out of ideas, but because Finlay is the kind of wrestler you dig into and keep finding more reasons he mattered. A grim, rough-edged veteran who always gave off the vibe of, touch me and it'll hurt. It was in WCW that the #1 pride of Northern Ireland first caught the wider world's attention under a nickname that basically smells like bruises, the Belfast Bruiser. Finlay didn't need fireworks. He didn't need some fancy catchphrase. He walked out, did the work, and let the other guy figure out, real fast, why he should be afraid. In that run, Finlay won the television title and cemented himself as a specialist in those heavy, gritty fights that make fans forget it's a performance and start believing it's real contact. Then 2000 showed up, and his body delivered the message. Injuries don't play around. Finlay hung up the leather jacket, stepped out of the spotlight, and shifted backstage during WCW's final dying days. When WWE bought the company, he got hired as a trainer and an agent, and in a very Finlay kind of luck, he basically sidestepped the entire chaos of the Invasion storyline. Behind the curtain, he was still Finlay, quiet, efficient, and the type of guy who could create discipline just by standing there. But after about 3 years, he answered a question most people his age avoid. Can I still go? And Finlay chose the riskier answer. In January 2006, he returned to WWE television at 47, an age where nothing is soft anymore, but experience is thick like armor. Over the next 4 years, Finlay stayed active in major programs, worked plenty of the top names of that era, and even captured the United States Championship. That's a real renaissance, not a cameo comeback, but a return that proved he still belonged in the game. And yes, he also helped bring Hornswoggle into WWE. Hey, nobody's perfect. After his second retirement, Finlay went backstage, popped up on TV now and then, and every time he did, the crowd still exploded. Like that moment he basically hit the green light for Becky Lynch's appearance at the Royal Rumble. Simple ending, Finlay didn't just come back. He proved some wrestlers get better the closer they get to the finish line. Number 9. Jeff Jarrett. After that match with Jay Lethal on Dynamite in November 2022, Darby Allin was stumbling around when somebody smashed a guitar right into his head. And in that moment, you almost didn't even need to see the face to know who it was. Because in wrestling history, a guitar shot isn't just a cheap hit, it's a signature. For half a second, people even joked, "Honky Tonk Man is all elite, baby." Then nope. It was Jeff Jarrett. Less shocking, maybe, but still enough to light up social media. Because Jarrett is the kind of guy where, the second he appears, the first emotion a lot of fans feel is suspicion. After a career that's long, wild, accomplished, and also full of controversy, JEFF walked into AEW just months after he had still been on WWE TV at SummerSlam. Instantly, the question hit, again? Is he about to pull the same old move, force his way up the card, demand the spotlight, and drag the whole show off course? But then something interesting happened. Jarrett didn't show up to be the old man hogging airtime. He showed up and found the right role. In a modern AEW where the pace is fast, the styles are all over the place, and everything is usually max adrenaline, Jarrett brought a flavor most people can't replicate, pure carny energy. That sneaky, over-the-top, old-school showman vibe that feels like a traveling fair, and somehow feels real at the same time. His Chosen One act wasn't a legend trying to prove he's still the best. It was a seasoned performer who understands exactly what a crowd wants, and knows precisely where to press to get a reaction. More importantly, Jarrett was one of the few guys who could serve his old-school dish without feeling out of place. Every time he showed up, the segment had this weird extra tension, like you were watching something structured, paced, built on psychology, and you kept thinking, don't underestimate this guy. And honestly, the lingering fear that the company might be crazy enough to put a major championship on a 55-year-old Jarrett, a former guy who sold gold, only made his appearances feel even more dangerous. You'd watch with that uneasy thought. No way, are they actually gonna do it? And because of that, since his debut, Jeff Jarrett became one of the most consistently entertaining people on the roster. Always able to create a moment, always able to get a response, always able to keep the story moving without trying too hard. Oh, and he once won the Leatherface title. Remember that?
Yeah.
That, too, is part of this bizarre but effective late career revival. Number 8. Dustin Rhodes. I'll hang around AEW a little longer, because Tony Khan, the kind of boss who collects older wrestlers the way a magpie collects shiny things, accidentally built the perfect stage for a man who spent his entire career doing the opposite of what people expect. Dustin Rhodes has never been the kind of guy you can look at once and predict. He slid through eras like a shapeshifter, a promising WCW rookie, then that heavily painted androgynous WWE character, then a stretch in TNA that, if you even bring it up, almost needs the line, "What on earth was happening?" attached to it. No matter the version, Dustin always had the same survival instinct. He knew how to stay relevant in an industry that's both brutal and quick to forget. But it wasn't until AEW existed that people truly started seeing him differently. Not as Cody's brother, not as the guy who used to be that gimmick, but as a polished veteran, craft sharpened over decades, with the core never gone. And that shift was sparked by a match against his own blood. At Double or Nothing 2019, AEW's first official pay-per-view, The Natural went to war with Cody. And when I say war, that's not hype. This was the kind of match that made you forget you were watching a brand new company's launch show, because what happened in that ring felt like an emotional reckoning more than a performance. They fought like they had something to prove to the world, and like they had to prove it to their family, too. It got so bloody you felt like one more step would push it past the viewer's limit. And yet Dustin, at an age where most guys slow it down, showed he could still empty the tank. The selling, the pacing, the emotion, the eyes, the timing of every strike, everything landed exactly where it needed to, like a man who understands the ring better than he could ever explain. This wasn't nostalgia. This was a veteran stepping forward and reminding everyone, skill doesn't disappear. It just gets buried by circumstances. Even if Dustin didn't always hit that exact peak again afterward, that one night was enough to re-etch his name with real respect. More importantly, it softened a lot of the darker memories and returned Dustin Rhodes to where he always belonged, quietly undeniable greatness. Number 7. Goldberg. Goldberg. Let's just call him Oldberg. Look at me, hilarious. But seriously, when Big Baldy Bill suddenly came back to WWE in late 2016, the wrestling world had a near-universal reaction, a cold shiver. Not because people were scared of him, but because they were scared it would go wrong. Everyone remembered WCW Goldberg as a runaway storm, no brakes, a human sledgehammer smashing straight through anything in front of him. But nobody forgot 2003 to 2004 in WWE either. Awkward timing, rough clashes, and an ending that made people want to close the book as fast as possible. Now he was more than a decade older. So what was there to expect besides disappointment? Turns out, we were very wrong. At Survivor Series, Goldberg walked out with the posture of a man who doesn't ask permission. And in just 88 seconds, he reminded the entire audience why this name used to be a big deal. Brock Lesnar, the guy who usually makes opponents look like toys, got hit, dumped, speared, jackhammered, and that was it. It happened so fast you barely finished one breath before the match became history. It felt like someone flipped a switch, and every bit of aura Goldberg had lost during his first WWE run snapped back into place. The vibe was crystal clear. Goldberg wasn't back to tell long stories. He came back like a human bulldozer, one setting only, forward. Every step, every roar, every stare carried the exact presence of a monster who doesn't need many words. And shockingly, late in his career, he became a reliable moment machine for any show. Short match, huge explosion, instant memory. The problem was, this time he felt too unstoppable. WWE didn't just use Goldberg as a special attraction, they pushed him into the highest title scenes. That's where the controversial choices hit. Beating Kevin Owens in 2017, then Bray Wyatt in 2020, then facing Bobby Lashley in 2021 with all the backlash that came with it. For a lot of fans, that kind of booking made them yell and grab their heads. Why would you do this? But no matter which side you're on, one thing is hard to deny. At that age, Goldberg pulled off something that isn't easy. He turned a comeback everybody doubted into a genuine renaissance. From a name people had written off as done, he returned and became Goldberg again. And honestly, that alone is special. Number 6. Mark Henry. Most people are lucky if they ever get to sit in the stands and watch the Olympics once. Mark Henry did something else. He walked out there as an athlete. Not as a one-time experience, either, but twice. That detail alone tells you what Henry carried through his whole career. Real credentials, real strength, and a kind of pressure that makes normal people want to politely back away. After success in powerlifting, a young Mark Henry shifted into pro wrestling when he signed with WWE in 1996. And here's the part that made people raise an eyebrow. It was a 10-year deal, almost a fairy tale contract for that time. WWE bet big, and Henry needed every bit of that time, maybe more, to turn that investment into a complete pro wrestler. Wrestling didn't come naturally to him. In the early years, the giant strongman looked like someone learning a new language. Sometimes he'd get a sentence right, but most of the time he'd stumble. Hesitant, uneven, not quite clicking. If you want to be polite, you call it, not there yet. If you're being honest, plenty of those matches felt like Henry had a monster body but didn't fully know how to operate it in the ring. And WWE kept turning him like a Rubik's Cube. One gimmick after another, man and beret, then some off-key ideas that wore the crowd out, then side roles like Tony Atlas' friend. Henry survived, he lasted, but nobody called it a shining run. And the frustrating part wasn't that he lacked potential. It was that he hadn't found the right shape for his power to become a story. Then 2011 happened. After more than a decade of constant repainting, Mark Henry finally struck gold when he started dragging people into the Hall of Pain. And boom, everything clicked, like someone finally found the correct key. This wasn't a big guy wandering around anymore. This was a relentless monster. No negotiation, no compromise, no stopping. Henry looked at opponents like objects meant to be broken to prove a simple point. Pain is inevitable. The crowd bought in because they believed it. They believed the charge, believed the squeeze, believed the heavy, crushing reality he brought into the ring. And by the end of that year, the world's strongest man had won the World Heavyweight Championship, his first true world title in a 15-year career. And no, the ECW belt doesn't count. In a lot of ways, Mark Henry really is like fine wine. He got better with age. And if you mess with him, he'll leave you with a pounding headache, literally and figuratively. Number 5. Mae Young. This list is mostly about people who bloomed late inside their in-ring careers. But if you only judge by wins, losses, or championship belts, you'll miss a case so unusual you simply can't leave it out. Mae Young is the kind of figure who makes the whole business pause for a second. The woman who's most remembered, most talked about run happened when she was already in her 70s. Mae wasn't born from the bright, polished TV era. She was a mid-20th century pioneer, part of a generation that had to carve a path with their own blood and bones long before the mainstream treated wrestling as mass entertainment. And then, in a twist nobody could have predicted, Mae showed up in WWE in 1999 as the on-screen best friend of the fabulous Moolah, a name that already had a place in the company. From that point on, a global audience met a grandma unlike anyone they'd ever seen on wrestling television. Over the next few years, Mae didn't win people over with flawless technique or a string of victories. She did it with reckless energy that made you laugh, and then immediately wonder if you were seeing things correctly. She threw herself into comedy segments with Moolah, Terry, the Cat, Ivory, threatening to strip on live TV one week, then leaving wrestlers and viewers thinking, wait, is she serious? Mae wasn't there to be background for someone else. She went all the way, and that complete disregard for her age is exactly what made her stand out. Then came the moments that forced you to blink twice just to confirm reality. Mae got pulled into an on-screen relationship with Mark Henry, yes, the same Mark Henry, until the story slid straight into, what are we doing here? territory and ended with her giving birth to a hand. Absurd. Completely. But in this world, Mae Young turned absurdity into something people still bring up like a comedy legend. And don't think she was just a punchline. Mae still took impact, literally and figuratively. This was a woman who got powerbombed off a stage through a stack of tables at 77 years old. Plenty of people wouldn't dare do that at 27. Mae did it, and carried herself like it was just another day at the office. That's a wild kind of renaissance. Not coming back to prove she was still dominant, but coming back to become an icon, chaotic, one of one, and impossible to replace. Number 4. The Undertaker. Because he was in WWE for so long, and because his character is basically ageless, people forget a pretty backwards truth. The Undertaker didn't truly enter the stretch of his best matches until he was already in his 40s. Sounds strange, right? A living symbol, a company pillar, the shadow at WrestleMania for decades. And the in-ring peak arrives that late. Don't get it twisted, young Undertaker was still a vital part of the machine. His character work was untouchable. The presence, the walk, the eyes, the way he made you believe that casket could swallow an opponent and their soul with it. But if we're talking match quality specifically, early Deadman had plenty of stuff that is better left unopened. Some matches weren't just not great. They were the kind that make you wonder how a legend ever had moments that loose. Just look at the first half of the streak. King Kong Bundy, Big Boss Man, Psycho Sid, Giant Gonzalez. You can smell the different era just reading the names. There were a few scattered bright spots, but most of that period felt like Undertaker was carrying the gimmick more than he was carrying classic matches. The streak was a big idea, sure, but it wasn't the sacred thing people would treat it as later. Then Undertaker crossed 40, and suddenly everything shifted. It felt like he found the perfect formula for his body. Less slow monster bulk, more clean pacing, and most importantly, an elite ability to tell a story one moment at a time. From there, Undertaker started producing matches people didn't watch only for the character, but because the match itself was genuinely great. His first WrestleMania Classic with Shawn Michaels happened when he was 44. The masterpiece with CM Punk came at 48. And that second Hell in a Cell with Brock Lesnar, arguably his last truly great in-ring performance, he was 50. Just seeing those ages on paper feels ridiculous. A body worn down by decades of injuries, brutal schedules, heavy collisions. And he could still work at that level, still pull that emotion, still make crowds hold their breath for every big strike. That's Undertaker's real renaissance, not returning after disappearing, but evolving late into the most complete version of himself, right when he should have been slowing down. Number 3. Sting. If Undertaker wrestled Sting at WrestleMania 31 like everybody dreamed, except Triple H, the Phenom would have been 50 and the Icon would have been 56. In wrestling terms, ancient. But that ancient part is exactly what would have made it sweet. Two symbols, two giant shadows, colliding right when time was catching them from behind. Sadly, that WWE match never happened. And even worse, that same year, Sting ended up retiring because of a mistimed buckle bomb, One of those accidents that makes you angry and sad at the same time, because the story closed in a way a legend never deserved. Then half a decade passed. People assumed the book was finished. Until Steve Borden showed up in All Elite Wrestling as a turn that made no logical sense, and somehow felt perfect. Winter is coming 2020, fake snow falling everywhere, the kind of snow that screams, billionaire money, and Sting walked out to a crowd roar that sounded like someone rewound time. Not a fun cameo. Not a wave and disappear appearance. Sting stood there, silent, and just his presence changed the tone of the whole show. At first, Sting worked in cinematic matches, pre-shot, safer, more controlled. Everyone understood why: age, injuries, the neck history. This wasn't the place to gamble. But the reason Sting ends up #1 on lists like this is that he didn't stay in the safe lane. He moved quickly into real in-ring wrestling, taking real contact, eating real shots. Before long, he was even volunteering to be the one who absorbed punishment so Darby Allin's hot tag could hit harder. A legend in his 60s willing to go down and be the foundation so a younger star could explode. That isn't nostalgia. That's professional pride. And of course, there was always a touch of insane. Most people hit their 60s and pick up hobbies like gardening or fishing. Sting decided he liked diving off balconies, crashing through tables, and doing risks that made fans cheer while also wanting to scream, "Sir, please stop." But that very irrationalness made people believe in Sting in a new way, not because he was immortal, but because he still had fire. The kind of fire you rarely get to see, and when you do, you're supposed to appreciate it. In AEW, Sting proved he's unlike any wrestler the world has ever seen, and probably won't ever see again. The show might be closing soon, but damn, these last few years have been one hell of a ride. Number 2. Bobby Lashley. Some wrestlers come back and you can feel they're trying to beg for one more chapter. Bobby Lashley came back like he'd been recharged with high-voltage electricity. Lashley had his first WWE run, then took a different path and became a major name in his own way. But when he returned, plenty of people still questioned it. Would he fit in modern WWE? Especially with his age past the point where most guys start slowing down. Then Lashley walked out looking like a living war statue. Not big for the sake of being big, but big in the touch him and you snap kind of way. His resurgence wasn't just about the physique, it was that WWE finally put him in the right role, a true dominator. Pairing him with MVP and the Hurt Business gave Lashley what he'd been missing before: context, presentation, and the feeling that he was the head of a real power structure, not just a muscular guy on the roster. He became champion in a way that felt brutally real, overwhelming, direct, no unnecessary flash. Lashley matches often played like watching a steel door slam in an opponent's face. And the best part is, he didn't need to talk much, because his body and the way he handled business in the ring did the talking for him. Late in his career, he didn't return for a quick nostalgia run. He returned to prove that some men get scarier with age, because they know exactly who they are and exactly how to crush you. Number 1. Samoa Joe. Some people get softer as they get older. Samoa Joe doesn't. He's aged, but the feeling of touch this man and you stop breathing has only gotten stronger. That's why Joe's late career renaissance feels both ridiculous and incredibly satisfying. Joe has always carried final boss aura. He walks out and the atmosphere shifts. But years of wear and tear, injuries piled on injuries, plus stretches where he was pulled out of a steady in-ring rhythm, had a lot of people thinking, that's probably it. He's just a nostalgia name now. Then Joe came back, and he didn't come back to wave at the crowd. He came back to do what he's always done best: make opponents look like they willingly walked into an interrogation room. In AEW/ROH, Joe doesn't need to fly around, and he doesn't need to prove he's faster than anyone. He works a style that's efficient but brutal, stinging chops, heavy elbows, and every coquina clutch feels like a stamped notice that says, "Show's over." People believe Joe because his violence has structure. There's logic to it, a rhythm, a story. And the key is that Joe didn't revive himself by trying to feel young again. He revived himself by turning age into an advantage. Tougher, smarter, more dangerous. When big opportunities arrived, he closed the deal like a seasoned pro. No extra decoration, no detours. He climbed to the top and stayed believable as a fighting champion, the kind of presence that forces anyone across from him to raise their level. In short, Late career Samoa Joe is like a toothache. You don't feel it every day, but when it hits, you remember it immediately, for a long time. So which comeback gave you the biggest goosebumps? Drop your take in the comments. And don't forget to hit like, subscribe to Wrestling Sphere, and turn on the bell so you won't miss the next round of awesome countdowns.